What is up, all you GBA type fans? This is Tom. I'm here to bring you guys my GBA playoffs, round 1 against Emvee and the San Diego Chimchargers. Going into this match, obviously this is a replay from, I believe, our week 7 match. In that match, I lost 3-0 on the backs, or to the fists or hooves of Verizion. Emvee did end up sweeping me 5-0 with Verizion after going for a swords dance and had proper coverage. And I do believe I learned a lot from that match. Namely, looking at my team doesn't necessarily like a few things, so to say. First off, as we learned even against Crimson in my preparation, not necessarily the nicest team in terms of knockoff. My team is pretty knockoff spammable. Nothing really wants to enjoy losing their item. In terms of other people's teams, maybe not the case. But in my circumstance, you know, he has things like Alolan Muck, even Landorus that can knock off and would really detriment a lot of my mons. In addition, a little bit of a fun fact for you guys, my team, I believe, has the lowest, if not near the bottom, in terms of overall base stat total average in terms of physical defense. And you look at Emvee's team, and a lot of it has set up either on just the physical side or is a pretty substantial physical attacker. Things like Landorus, things like Dragonite, things like Alolan Muck, even Kingdra and Verizion Kabutops. So with that in mind, I do have to prep more harshly on the physical side than the special side. I do have some pretty good mons to sponge a lot of his special hits, and I do believe that looking at my team, he'll prep more heavily on the physical side in order to beat me. In addition, my team has so few options for Z Dragonite, in addition to sub-CM Cress, whether he is just Psychic and T-Bolt, Psyshock and Ice Beam, Psychic and Ice Beam. You get the point. Same way Mono kind of dismantled my team. I think Emvee can do the same again this time around. And then even things like maybe a setup Landorus or Verizion, even Scarf Landorus, all do a really good job against my team. So before we jump into my team, just go over his team real quick. Landorus T, Pelipper, Magnezone, Dragonite, Alakazam, Alolan Muck, Empoleon, Cresselia, Kingdra, Verizion, Kabutops. Nothing has really changed. I believe he dropped Omastar for Kabutops prior to our match, so I'm not necessarily prepping any differently, at least not for what I'm looking at on his team. However, I am prepping much differently on how I'm building my team in order to better counteract his offense. And I'll explain why by first going back into my Week 7 team builder, kind of review the team, to really get an idea of how I'm going to change how I'm going into this match. Alright, so here is kind of, you know, a rough look first off at the team I brought last time versus Emvee. We had kind of a Luracell Steelers set. This was there specifically to try and bait in Magnezone and then try and knock it out with a Earthquake, even be able to do a good amount of damage to Landorus with HP Ice, Flame Charges there for setup, and Heavy Slime just did a lot of damage overall to his team. Didn't necessarily work out because it didn't bring Magnezone, so kind of a waste. I had a very bulky Thundurus. This almost heavily, entirely relied on setup in order to get going. Going to change that this time around because I do feel like this set didn't necessarily work. Same with the Celesteela set. It was kind of a shot in the dark. It was asking for too much, and in terms of Emvee's team, he can bear pressure onto me faster than I could bear pressure onto him. So I've got to look at that a bit differently going into this match. Next up, we had a very passive core in terms of P2 and Vaporeon. Vaporeon was there to roar out the problems that would set up on my team. However, Emvee is a good enough player to recognize that after 1 or 2 times of me roaring, there's only so many times that Vaporeon can take a hit, wish up, and then roar out. In addition, he can also just straight up attack on a switch, and whether it's Landorus, Verizion, Cress, you know, Kingdra, Dragonite especially, going for just that raw damage a few times and then, you know, having rocks up is just going to annihilate this Vaporeon. It's not really going to work. P2, same thing. A lot of his threats can set up sub, and based on the coverage that I do or don't have, he can then go ahead and just set up sub. In the case with Cresselia, you know, if I'm running ice and, you know, I guess, like in this case, ground or ice and normal, if I want to, you know, be a neutral hit, if he invests enough into bulk, something can set up a sub, take the hit, start setting up in my face, P2 just becomes setup fodder, then we have a problem. Next up, probably the only successful set I had last time was this Apricot Natural Gift Ground Azelf. Granted, not necessarily think it's going to work this time, solely because I do believe he's going to see this coming. If not, you know, it's like a one-trick pony. I don't want to blow this move again. And, you know, even though Alolan Muck is a problem, I feel like there's a better set I can use on Azelf this time around. Finally, we had this Gardevoir set, which was good in idea, but awful in actual execution. Emvee kind of saw straight through this, you know, planned super effectively for this. Cresselia outsped regardless, was able to get behind a sub. As I taunted, it still Calm Mind, got to +1, and overall was able to win this battle because he did prep to basically see through any sort of idea with a taunt shutdown Gardevoir. So like I said, this time around, I am going to, you know, hone in a lot differently on how I'm going to be attacking his team. And I'll show you why right now. Alright, so, you're looking at my team right now. I am bringing Celesteela, Thundurus, Nidoqueen, Azelf, Zygarde Doggo, and Darmanitan. A very, very offensive team. We don't see Porygon 2, we don't see Vaporeon, we don't see Hitmonlee, Shiftry, Shocker, or if I'm missing a Mon, so be it. But the point for this team is to kind of apply more pressure on him than he's going to be applying on me. Starting off, we have something that I definitely need to bring, and that's going to be a defensive, mostly mixed defensive Celesteela. It's going to be carrying Leftovers as compared to Shed Shell. I was going back and forth between Shed Shell and Leftovers. However, I'm either A, banking on the fact he's not going to bring Magnezone. I do think that Magnezone versus my team is kind of a detriment. I have 2 Ground Mons, right? I have a Mon that's entirely, you know, immune to Electric. He would have to make so many predictions, even if he goes for Steel or Ice coverage. I have a Vaporeon, which can take those hits. I have a Nidoqueen, which can take those hits. And just overall, I don't think it's in his best interest to bring Magnezone, so Leftovers allows me to have more longevity for the physical threats this thing needs to take on, which are quite expansive. And those are going to include Landorus T, which this thing is going to be like a primary switch-in for. I am immune to one of its greatest stabs, being Earthquake. Zam, this thing can kind of take on, not take so much damage, hence the special defense investment. Psychic plus Ice coverage on a Calm Mind Cresselia. I'd be able to kind of Heavy Slam, break some subs. It does, Heavy Slam does about 36 to 40% to a max HP with some defense invested Cress. Alolan Muck I could pretty much do a lot of damage to outside of, you know, if he has like a Fire Punch. But even, you know, the only thing it's really going to do is knock off, and I'd like to keep the Leftovers on this Celesteela as long as humanly possible. And then Virizion. Obviously, a close combat's going to do a lot of damage, and even a +2, but Heavy Slam is doing about 38 to like 42%, and that's like a resisted hit, I think. But even so, the weight difference is so substantial between Celesteela and Virizion. Heavy Slam is actually doing more damage with you know, uninvested than an invested Flamethrower is doing to that. So that's why I'm running Earthquake over Fire, Fire Stab, or Fire Move. This set was initially Heavy Slam plus Flamethrower. Changed it to Heavy Slam plus Earthquake because the idea here is that he has to have so much, he has to actually be Specs Magnezone if he brings it in order to knock out the Celesteela pretty much outright, or even after a little bit of chip damage. If he is Assault Vest, if he is Air Balloon, if he's even Choice Scarf, and he goes for Volt Switch, the thing I can do with this Celesteela is I can Leech Seed, I can Protect to see what he's going to lock himself into, I can, because the Leftovers I can get some passive recovery back, and then Earthquake, if he's like an Assault Vest, he A, can't knock me out, and I could pretty much knock him out then with an Earthquake. Leech Seed is there for passive recovery, it's also there to break Dragonite's Multiscale. In addition, this set can take a +1 Inferno Overdrive from Dragonite at basically full HP. And that's pretty much it. Just has optimal coverage between Steel and Ground. No Shed Shell, like I said. And overall, this is my best defensive check to a lot of the problems that I face on this team. Now, this is pretty much my only, like, sort of traditional wall that I'll be bringing against Emvee. The rest is pretty much offense, if not some very different sets, I'll say. But different with effective, not different for the sake of just being, you know, fucking zany. So, next up, we have a Thundurus. And this set is going to look a little weird, but it makes sense. We know Emvee likes to run the Healing Berry, basically the citrus on steroids. This will be carrying a Mago Berry. And if you also see here, this is going to have an even investment in terms of HP. That is there so that basically this is designed to switch in on rocks. I say that because Emvee has an easier time removing rocks that I set up against him than I do when he sets up rocks against me, whether it's from Landorus or whether it's from Empoleon. With that in mind, I can kind of use this as a lead set. I could taunt Empoleon in the case that he wants to go for rocks outright. I could taunt, then Volt Switch, burn his Wakan Berry, do a lot of damage, and ensure that I could, you know, basically weaken Empoleon to the point where he has to sack it off to something like Nidoqueen, Zydog, or Darmanitan, which you'll see in a minute. But Volt Switch is there for pivot. It's also there to hit Pelipper as well as... Oh, and Empoleon, right. HP Ice is there for Dragonite. It's also there for Landorus. Knockoff is there because the idea that I had this time is Emvee forces a lot of... You know, his opponent has to make a lot of, like, loopy fucking predictions. And I'm not really about that anymore. As we saw with John, when he took on Emvee, I think that, you know, running less 50-50 predictions on, you know, your part being his opponent is a better situation in the long run. I say that because if I'm, you know, in just with Thundurus, right, whether or not the Mago Berry is busted or not, basically whatever he brings in, whether it's Muck, whether it's Empoleon, whether it's Cress, whether it's Landorus, nothing really wants to lose its item. I say that because if I go for knockoff then Volt Switch, Empoleon will lose Wakan Berry, its leftovers take a lot of damage. Landorus, if it comes in thinking I'm going to go for an electric move, I knock off, remove its Scarf, remove its Yachi Berry, whatever, remove its Rocky Helmet, and then I go for HP Ice and I knock it out. Nothing besides Landorus is going to want to take that electric or that ice move, and you know, I could then HP Ice, Volt Switch, do a lot of damage, and chip away at things that are going to be bulky or kind of a problem. Magnezone, AV, or if it's like Air Balloon or if it's some other bullshit, knock off, Volt Switch, I'm out. Basically, Thundurus is at a nice speed tier that I can outspeed pretty much a lot of his problems, and this is, of course, Sped Crep to outspeed a non-Scarf Landorus once I can knock off the item. Muck, I can knock off the AV, I can knock off a Figgy, and this thing is meant to live to take 3 Rock Switch-ins plus some damage. The Mago kicks in, replenishes, you know, upwards of 50% of my HP, and I really only need the Volt Switch plus the HP Ice to cover a vast majority of his team. I like this set. Mago Berry is actually, you know, suggested by Aster, props to him, and it was a very good idea. I was playing around with the idea of like a Chalan Berry, but if he's already at +1 with Dragonite, there's really no reason for him to go for E-Speed, and if, you know, I've already taken 2 Rock Switch-ins, or Mago Berry hasn't popped, doesn't really matter because Chalan Berry +1 E-Speed is going to knock me out, even a Dragon Claw is going to knock me out outright, especially if he knows if I'm not Scarfed at that point. I was playing around with like Charty Berry for Landorus, but this is not really a set to kind of take a Stone Edge. It's there mostly to knock off something from Landorus, knock off something from his walls, and then Volt Switch or Taunt accordingly. Do like this Thundurus set. It's a lot, I think this is a lot more efficient than the set I brought last time. It's roughly the same, well, it's not the same EVs, it's less bulky, but it's more offensive with a purpose, I should say. And obviously having that Taunt utility is super nice for things like Cresselia, things like Empoleon, even things, I guess that's pretty much it. Overall, I think this Thundurus set's going to do a lot more work than the Thundurus I brought last time. Next up, we have Nidoqueen. This is going to be a sub-toxic set with Earth and Ice coverage in terms of Earthquake and Ice Punch. This is also a different set, but we look at Emvee's team, he doesn't really have a Cleric. So sub-toxic, I could threaten out things like Empoleon, Muck, even Magnezone. Even if it is Scarfed, he's locked into a Steel move, locked into an Electric move. I can go for sub, and then this thing starts to cause some problems. Earthquake covers a vast majority of his team. It covers things like Empoleon, Muck, and Magnezone, like I said. Ice Punch covers things that are not Cresselia. Hits Landorus, hits Dragonite. Virizion is hit by Ice Punch. Basically, once this thing gets behind a sub, he's going to have to play for things on his team to really, you know, take damage. Even if I am behind a sub and I go for Toxic on a switch, you know, even like a Cress. This is specifically built to outspeed Cress. We saw last time he outsped a max speed modest Gardevoir, I think. If not, it was a kind of a sped crept Gardevoir for him. I don't think he's going to expect this, and as a result, having the max speed, the max HP allows me for the most bulk. I don't need a lot of attack investment, hence the 4 attack investment to either 2-shot, if not do a hefty amount of damage to Landorus, Virizion, Empoleon, Magnezone. Magnezone I kill outright with Earthquake. Alolan Muck, if it has like no defense investment, I almost kill outright with Earthquake, plus Ice Punch, whatever, plus a little bit of chip damage regardless. Basically, This set is not going to kill things outright with, full attack investment, so there's no purpose to it. Instead, I put it in speed and HP, allowed to be bulky, allowed to be fast, to outspeed Cresselia, so I could Toxic it in case he goes for sub, in case he starts Calm Minding. Because if he's behind a sub and I already get the Toxic off and I hit it, because I think it is 100% off of a Poison type, he then is going to be chipped away that much faster if he only has leftovers. The 6%, 12% after the sub, he's really going to be hindered, and he can't Calm Mind Sweep me like he tried to do last time. So this is a much better set than the Vaporeon set that I ran, because the Roar is just so passive, P2 is so passive. This set at least allows me to outspeed the problem Cresselia, allows me to Toxic it, allows me to then hit his team accordingly, and really applies a good amount of pressure that I think a lot of things I had last time didn't necessarily do. In addition, it's just super bulky. It's also a soft check to Magnezone. I think some of the calcs, like the most substantial calc, is that if I'm behind a sub and he brings in Landorus, Ice Punch at -1 is doing 62 to 70%, and he would have to go for an Earthquake in order to break my sub, even a knockoff. And once Landorus goes down, it kind of opens the door a lot for Thundurus, Zygarde, and Darmanitan. This does a lot of damage, same thing with Thundurus, to a lot of Emvee's team. Next up, we have a Scarf Azelf. This is going to be another soft check to Cresselia. This is also going to be a kind of a pivot set, as well as what I'm going to be running rocks on. Scarf Rocks does seem a little bizarre. However, if I lead off with Thundurus, and he's leading off with Empoleon, what I can do is I can essentially... I could taunt it. I can at some point go into Azelf. If he does end up getting rocks up, I can get rocks up on my own. And in the case that he doesn't want Dragonite's multiscale to be broken, I can then go for... I can force him to defog with Empoleon, bring in something on my team that's kind of a threat to his Empoleon, and either force it to die, which then removes rocks in the field entirely, or I can then ensure that rocks are up on his side, so that Dragonite's going to take that multiscale, remove multiscale, take that rocks damage 25%, which puts me in a better position in terms of my sweepers, especially this, because Scarf Ice Punch outspeeds Dragonite at +1, it also outspeeds Scarf Landorus. This is meant to outspeed a Virizion without a Scarf. Obviously, you see I tricked there. That's to cripple a Cresselia if it gets, even 1 Calm Mind, 2 Calm Minds up. The trick is there to cripple it so it can't continue Calm Minding or subbing or whatever. If he's going to lock himself into an electric or a Psychic move or Ice move or whatever, basically it's what I have Cresselia for. I can then take that damage and then go out into something accordingly. So the U-turn, like I said, is there for pivot. Trick is there for Cresselia. Stealth Rock is there to pressure his Dragonite or pressure Empoleon to defog. Ice Punch is there for Virizion, which I'm going to revenge kill. Dragonite, I have enough bulk to take a +1 E-speed at about 75%. I can knock it out with Ice Punch. I can also knock out things like Virizion and Landorus on a revenge kill type scenario. So Azelf, I think, is a lot more effective. I'm not going to bring the Natural Gift Ground set again in case he wants to actually predict it and go into Landorus or Cresselia. Kind of a one-trick pony. Not going to try it again. Next up, we have a Zygarde set that I'm sure is going to throw a lot of people off, because it is much, much different than the Banded, Scarf, or even D-Dance set that I've been running for the majority of this season. We see it is a bulky. Bulky is in pretty much quotations. Leftovers. 1,000 Arrows Toxic Sub Protect set. This is going to serve similar to the Nidoqueen set. If I can get up behind a sub and Toxic, I could put Virizion on a timer, I could put Cresselia on a timer. This is meant to outspeed a max speed creep Virizion for Darmanitan. Virizion obviously is not going to run super max speed because it's kind of a waste of EVs. He is going to round down to outspeed, I believe it's 170. Yeah, so he's going to be running 169 to outspeed Darmanitan at 168. So I'm going to be running 170 to outspeed Virizion at 169, which allows me to Toxic it, obviously get behind a sub. That would allow me to Toxic. I can then Protect in order to kind of rack up more Toxic damage. This is an interesting set. I say that because while it can threaten out a lot of things, namely Alolan Muck, Empoleon, Magnezone, I could sub pretty freely. I can then pretty much Toxic 1,000 arrows what I'm looking at. Landorus doesn't appreciate more than 3,000 arrows after Stealth Rock. I can then Toxic, Cresselia, Landorus, Virizion. I could also, because those things are the best switch-ins for 1,000 arrows. I heavily threaten, like I said, Muck, Empoleon, Magnezone, and then I can Protect to see if Landorus or Magnezone is Scarfed, and I could rack up some Toxic damage against some things accordingly. This thing allows, like my other threats being Thunderous, even Darmanitan, even Azelf, once Landorus and Virizion are down or damaged, to set up to wreck a lot of his team. Unfortunately, this thing is super frail, so even the HP plus a defense investment, I'm still taking like 44% from a U-turn from the Landorus, but, even getting Landorus Toxic is super detrimental for my team. Just all overall passive damage against Emvee's team between rocks, toxic, any sort of status, lead sheet on Celesteela is super nice for my team against his team. And I think we're going to see that really pan out. I think that's how a very good way to beat Emvee's team, or at least the best way that I'm going to be beating Emvee's team. A banded set didn't quite do the job. He does have 2 really good switch-ins, 1,000 arrows. I don't want to switch out, in case he brings a Virizion on 1,000 arrows. I don't want to lock myself into Dragon move because this thing only gets Outrage. It should get Dragon Claw. It has a fucking paw. Dragon Paw. Lesser Dragon Claw move. There you go, Game Freak. Use that shit. And it would do, it would do some damage, but Outrage, he has Cresselia, he has Magnezone, he has Empoleon, he has Landorus, all of which are going to take Outrages. Don't necessarily want to be a choice set, don't want to be a D-Dance set. It's not really going to be that, it's not that super effective, not that really great, because this thing is not Zygarde's neck. This is my best option. This was actually suggested by a combination, well, mostly Jared, but also Aster kind of thought this was really a really good set. I agree, and hopefully it does pan out the way that, projected in preparation. Finally, we have Scarf Darmanitan. This, I think, I didn't bring this last time, and I thought that with the rain, this thing wouldn't do a lot of damage, but we see that fire plus rock coverage to his team outside of rain is super detrimental. Nothing on his team outside of, I guess, Dragonite and Pelipper are going to appreciate a fire move. Cresselia isn't really going to appreciate a Flare Blitz. Once Emvee's Landorus is heavily damaged or down, I believe that Flare Blitz does like 43 to 51% at -1, so we can't bring it in more than, well, once. I did a Fire Punch on this set, but I kind of changed it out for U-Turn, mostly because I believe that it's going to do... U-Turn allows me to at least pivot. Granted, though, if rocks are up, we're going to have a big problem. I also have Will-O-Wisp on there, so if he goes into Landorus, I can then cripple it with Will-O-Wisp and allow something else on my team, whether it's, whether it's Nidoqueen, or if it's Azelf, or if it's even Thunderous. Anything on my team would really appreciate if Landorus was burned, because if it's Scarf burn, U-Turn's not going to do a lot of damage. Knockoff, Earthquake, Stone Edge, what have you, is not really going to do all that much damage. And that, again, residual damage versus his team is super nice. U-Turn to pivot. Yeah, I pretty much talked about everything. This is meant to outspeed a Scarf Landorus T. And that's pretty much my team. Not much really to say. This thing is... Most of the things on my team are super offensive. At least meant to pressure a lot of Emvee's team outright. The only thing that you can really say is super passive is this Celesteela. Otherwise, Thunderous has pivot and ways to pressure, if not just remove a lot of utility from his team. The Azelf is there as a nice revenge killer, if not pivot, but also there as utility with Stealth Rock and Trick to cripple, or otherwise allow me to, work the game a little bit better. Zygarde, Doggo, and Nidoqueen are going to serve similar purposes. Subtoxic is super nice, plus good coverage. And then Darmanitan is also there as a Scarf Sweeper, as well as utility with Pivot on U-Turn and Wisp to burn things. So overall, I believe this team is a lot better. Do I still have a solid check to Dragonite? Not really. Do I have a prime candidate that wants to get knocked off from Alolan Muck or Landorus? Not really. Do I have the best checks to all of his mons? Not really. But that's not really the point. I prepped the best team I possibly could. I believe this team is the best team I possibly could. And with that in mind, I just believe that this is the best mons I could possibly bring. If anyone's wondering, I didn't scroll down for the Natures, Impish, Celesteela. We have Timid, Thunderous, Jolly, Nidoqueen, Jolly Azelf, Jolly Psydog, and Jolly Darmanitan. A lot of Jolly things. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry if it's so long. Skip around at your own desire. I will see you guys tomorrow for our battle. I believe it's going to go up around 2 o'clock, 2:30. I'll coordinate with Emvee. Until then, see you guys for the match tomorrow. And hopefully you guys are excited as I am. Let's go Sharpedos. It's crunch time. Let's see if I can take down pretty much my Everest at this point in terms of Emvee. And let's see if I can make it to the next round of the playoffs. See you guys tomorrow.